pleasure to be here as part of this symposium, which is on such an important topic, and that is, of course, the Indian Academy partnering with the Human Cell Atlas that clearly gives us the understanding of how important it is to take the entire science knowledge and take it towards the applications in science. So I think that really is the key and crux of this whole matter. It's the knowledge generation and then the application of the science, which is important and critical for us. I think the whole concept of the Human Cell Atlas has been so wonderfully put together. I missed the first talk, although I did join in the end when I did hear a reference to an example of India being talked about. And I'm sure India does feature into all the various examples because we've had a lot of strength in this whole area. And over many years, our strength in basic and fundamental research and taking it through the growth trajectory to the translational research and application science has something that our scientists, our researchers, our students have proven so well. I think the whole area that we are discussing here and discussing it in today's time makes it all the more interesting and challenging, because when we talk about COVID, we talk about the challenges COVID has positioned before us, but then we also talk about the opportunities which COVID is actually has given us in terms of what really our knowledge is, what nearly we need to look at in terms of the new norm that is going to be for various interactions. We know this, that today as we speak, we've had huge challenges in terms of our collaboration because of mobility. We would not have been sitting on a virtual platform like this discussing such important topics. We would have had a 2 or 3 day symposia where everyone would have met, they would have shared their data, they would have had chats on the sideline and the coffee breaks and in the tea breaks, where you build much stronger collaborations. But as we are positioned, I think this is going to be the new normal for some time. So it makes it all the more important for us to make sure that all the data that we put together is so well documented so that it becomes easier for us to then exchange and share data and share knowledge, which can then be made available to the larger scientific research community. The consortia like Human Cell Atlas definitely give such an opportunity, which brings together a large number of research groups, brings together a large number of organizations, countries, all with a common objective and a common goal. And the strengths that each one has then gets leveraged to be able to give us that application as we move forward. If you look at this entire omics platform that we all talk about, so over the last couple of years, there has been a huge emphasis on it. And if you look at the Human Genome Initiative, which was, I think, the basis of all these sort of activities starting from the human genomics area, each one of us who participated in it or took on activities beyond that know the tremendous value that that sort of a consortium and subsequent consortiums which have worked on it have brought forward. The Department of Biotechnology, as Dr. Partha Majumdar explained, for those of you who are not aware, is the nodal and focal point of the Government of India for the biotechnology research. The Department of Biotechnology, in fact, the Government of India is one of the few governments which has a separate Department of Biotechnology. It's been in 1986 it was established, so it's nearly 34 years into existence now. The whole mandate with which the Department of Biotechnology was set up was primarily because I think the strength of biotechnology was recognized by the Government of India way back in the 80s. It was also foreseen that this is going to play a very crucial and critical role, this technology, in terms of all the various streams, whether it's health, whether it's agriculture, whether it's energy, nutrition, all of them. And with that, the main focus that was given by the Department of Biotechnology was how do we then ensure that we have a very vibrant biotechnology research ecosystem within the country. Our primary focus was on building the human resource, building the infrastructure, and as we moved on, building very sound, robust technology platforms, bringing in institutional structures which help us to take that forward, and most importantly for us, building wonderful collaborations, both national and international. I think DBT, the Department of Biotechnology, was one of the few departments which very early on, in its inception, recognized the strengths of collaboration. And it was right in 86 itself when our first lot of programs began, our international collaborations began. And this was because we do realize this, that science actually recognizes no borders. Science is something which is universal. Knowledge is universal. It's important for us to share and exchange knowledge, as I said, and help us to build upon the strong foundations that we set up within our own countries. Over these more than 30 years, if you, and those of you who've been, part of this whole growing up of the biotechnology ecosystem in the country, would have seen how very strategically, with a very well-planned and thought-through process, the capacities were built across the country. We have very, very sound and strong centers of excellence, which work on all these aspects: human resource, infrastructure, technology platforms. These then took on the role of mentoring and bringing in other universities and institutes with them. So today, across the country, the Department of Biotechnology has its support and its ecosystem that we have supported across, I think, any laboratory that does anything in biotechnology and biological sciences has some sort of a support that comes from the government, from the Department of Biotechnology, whether it's in terms of the students that we support through the undergraduate, graduate, the postdoctoral, the doctoral, postdoctoral, and other fellowships, or as I said, in terms of the projects, the extramural research funding that we do. We have a large number of extramural research funding projects that we support, or the high-end infrastructure that we have set up across the country for this. The whole ecosystem that we've covered is from basic, looking at the entire basic fundamental research, taking it to applied research, to translational research. Dr. Partha Majumdar spoke about Bairag. It was in 2012 that we actually set up a fully government-owned company to then bring in the startup and the industry ecosystem to become a part of this larger growth trajectory that we were planning and we were working on for the biotechnology sector. Because we did realize that when we're looking at knowledge generation, when we're looking at these translational science components, it can actually get translated when you bring the industry on. So we do have a complete holistic ecosystem development that we look at, from the young students and researchers in universities to the startups in industry, which take the products and the technologies for translation and product development. Looking at this, I think coming specifically to what really have been our strengths and what have been our key programs in the areas that we are discussing in this seminar today, there has been a major focus that we've had in terms of all the genomic studies. We obviously have a lot of strength within the country, as I said, through these various programs that we've supported in the areas of cell science, in the areas of structural biology, systems biology, computational biology, looking at the proteomics, looking at all the omics activities. While the projects that we've supported gave us a lot of understanding of looking at not these as just individual studies, but connecting them to the disease biology groups, connecting them to various disease models, and seeing how you look at it from the applied angle as well. And then, of course, our major focus was, and for the genomic studies when we began, was on the cancer genomics, and Dr. Partha Majumdar himself led that major consortium that we set up, and our international, we are partners to the International Cancer Genomics Consortium. Similarly, we've also looked at other disease areas where we are looking at genomic studies for setting up these sort of consortia activities. We have our other large group that we're looking at, and that is the maternal and child health area, where we have a large number of programs, we have a large number of activities looking at the genomics component of it. The whole purpose that we were wanting to do is, as I said, connect all the dots together. So we started looking at it in a very large holistic manner. The Kalyani cluster that we set up was primarily for the cancer genomics work. The Kalyani, so we actually have these bio clusters that we've set up. The NCR bio cluster that we have in Faridabad, which is looking at the maternal and child health. So while they do the genomic studies, they're also linked with the cohorts that they work upon. So you have these large cohort studies that we support, and both for the cancer genomics area and for the maternal and child health, we have very large cohort populations that are now being looked at not just as project support, but as large program support, so that these can have a sustained and a continued support from the government. We also realize that it's not just the genomics activities which have to be looked at in isolation. It's not just looking at the genome sequencing and getting the data, but as I said, taking it back to the understanding from the disease part of it. We have now, in fact, it was just early this year, in January itself, when we launched the Genome India Consortium. The Genome India Consortium is one of the largest consortium which has been launched within the country, which is looking at the genome sequencing of 20,000 population, 10,000 healthy population, 10,000 disease-based population. They began their work well. Of course, COVID put them a little off track, but we hope that they'll come back to track again to see how they can start this sequencing activity. We have identified 4 or 5 key priority disease areas which they would be targeting on. Cancer, of course. We're looking at maternal and child health, looking at rare and genetic disorders, which is very key for us as we move on, looking at brain disorders, and looking at the whole area of cardiovascular diseases. This is, of course, to begin with, but there would be others as we move forward. While we were planning this whole program, it was also felt important that we link it with the microbiome studies. So we have parallelly launched the Human Microbiome Initiative for the country. And here we have actually looked at bringing in a subset of the population. And this subset of the population is from this Genome India population, so that while we look at the genomic studies, we have a complete microbiome data that we can take forward. When you look at this large amount of data that is being collected, the immediate point that comes into your mind is, how is this data now going to be handled? So we do understand that we need to have very, very strong data management systems. We need to have an institutional structure in place which helps us to then not just have people who generate this data, but this data is, as I said, shared, and the value of this data gets enhanced when you have other groups who use this data and ask many other questions which would be important and relevant from that data set. Keeping this in mind, we put together a group who started discussing on the need for having a policy or a guideline for biological data sharing and access. It was a huge exercise that we did. And again, we had the engagement of very senior experts, both from the genomics area, from the data side, from people from the statistical groups, looking at people who are already working from the clinician point of view, seeing what really is the importance of this data, how do we share it. The government has put together a policy which was put out for stakeholder consultations. It was put out onto the public domain for a number of weeks. And currently we are in the process of getting a government approval for it, so that we have an approved policy that allows us to understand what the importance of data sharing is. There is a larger government 2012 policy which talks about sharing of data, which is more about metadata and other forms of data, but this is specifically on biological data. The key point that would come out then is that when you set up a policy such as this, how are you going to manage all this data? Somebody would ask us, well, you've already put together a policy, but where is your data going to be stored? Who's going to be the key person responsible to make sure that there is proper sharing of this data? And with this came up the whole concept of having our Indian Biological Data Center. We did realize that a lot of data is generated from our Indian scientists and researchers. In fact, if you look at the NCBI site and others, you'll see tremendous amount of valuable data which has been generated and put onto it. So we have been in discussions with NCBI, we've been in discussions with the EMBL and the group at UK and others to see, can we have a center in India which would then be able to work with these other global centers to be able to become an important repository of data, which can then also be important for sharing. We've set up the pilot. The first pilot was just set up about 3 months back. And obviously, COVID has derailed a lot of activities, but we are hopeful in the next about 6 months, the pilot data center would be operational to take on the initial first set of data sets that we have within the country and be able to test it out before we then open it up for all other users to come in and work out models in which for India, for a country like India and the large volumes of data and the diversity of data, we would have to look at some sort of decentralized models as well. So our expert groups are currently debating on that, and we hope we'll have this there. But the key point is that, yes, we do have our biological data center already approved and it's already working now, and hopefully we'll be in position very quickly. I think what I'm just trying to convey to you is that from the Government of India, we're looking at each of the components, trying to see how we connect each of the dots. We are aware that you need to connect the cohorts to the data which is collected, and then you obviously need to have very, very strong data analytic groups. You need to have the computational biology groups, the bioinformatic groups. The Department of Biotechnology over these last 30 years across the country has set up one of the largest bioinformatics network systems. And we have, in fact, called the Biotechnology Information Network System, the BTINS, and that is in more than 150 locations across the country. We have very recently, just about, I think, a couple of months back, re-looked at it to see which of those centers needs to be strengthened, which of those centers need to be now connected to these large data programs that we are launching, whether it's our cancer genomics or maternal and child health groups or our rare and genetic disorder groups, because these centers have created a lot of value through their human resource that they've trained, through the software, through their whole understanding of biology and linking data with biology. And I think that is key and crucial for us as we move forward. We do understand and appreciate that a very deep understanding of data sciences and getting the biology groups to work with the data science group is today a challenge, and that is really what we are now focusing on. It is important for us to build a whole workforce of skilled human resource who can use this data and very intelligently look at new questions that they can ask, which can then help us to move towards the application side of this data. Because the value of this data is going to be as important as best as we use it. And the more we bring in innovations in terms of using this data, the more understanding that we bring in terms of using this data is going to help us to take it forward. Very recently, we launched a major program, which was for engagement of the students into understanding this whole cell biology and understanding the whole human cell and the whole human atlas, basically. This program is called Manaf, and this program that we have launched is spread across the country. Our target is that we would have something like about 10,000 to 20,000 students who would be engaged in it. They've already started this task. They've created a platform. What are we doing? We're actually working with students in some of the premier institutes, but also in remote universities and others, giving the students an understanding of how can they go through secondary data. Look at the huge volumes of published data and link it to various disease biology groups that we have. Look at this data, analyze this data, put it into this platform so that we could then get a very good understanding of the secondary data. And for those groups who are generating primary data, there will be a linkage of this. So creating data platforms, getting the students to be engaged is the first step so that they could have their hands into it and they can start understanding. And slowly our purpose is these students would then move into becoming our workforce for linking biology with data science. It's a huge and a very ambitious program. I've discussed it with Dr. Partha Majumdar. At some point of time, we would like to see the linkage of this large Manaf platform that we've created with the Human Cell Atlas program that you have. Try to see how we could look at new knowledge that is generated, both in terms of the secondary data which they are collecting, linking it to the primary data. And I think at this point of time, it's important for me to say that I've been having discussions with Dr. Partha Majumdar along with our team of experts. And we are now discussing the possibilities of how India could become partners and take it forward. We would be very happy to discuss this possibility further. We do understand the value that this has. We understand the value it has in building our workforce, in our deep understanding in terms of the knowledge it's going to help us to generate, but also in terms of the application and the translation that this consortium is going to offer in terms of its strength to take it forward. The last point that I would just like to mention to you is that while we've put together this entire program concept that I've explained to you, we do have other discussions which we are moving forward. Of course, our India is already a member of the EMBO of the HFSPO. We are now looking at becoming partners with members with the EMBL directly, mainly because we do understand, as I said right in the beginning, the strength that these partnerships give us in being able to bring in capacities within our country and to raise the level of understanding and collaborations of our scientists and researchers across the country. The combination of the deep understanding of cell sciences, bringing in the combination with the genomics or the omics studies, and then looking at the data part of it for application is today our major mission. And we are actually now taking it forward as a mission in terms of looking at genomics for healthcare. We obviously have genomics for agriculture and others separately, but genomics for healthcare is a key mission that India is now driving, and that is already being put into our next 5-year action plan. We would want to see the application of genomics technology, bringing in the artificial intelligence and others to help us not just in the precision medicine, in the early predictive diagnosis, but looking at it in terms of the opportunities it offers us for our therapeutics, our diagnostics, and others as well. And as I said, these 4 or 5 areas that we've identified as key is important for us. And one of our most ambitious component out of this is our rare and genetic disorders, where we've already started a major network across the country, where we are working currently today in about 25 locations, where we are trying to use the understanding that we have of the genomics data, but more importantly, it's the genetic counseling that is being done. So we've already set up these genetic counseling units, and there we are also doing training of the clinical genetics to be able to then, our ultimate ambition is, can we actually bring in newborn screening? And those newborn screening becomes part of our health system program in the next 2 to 3 years. So my whole purpose today was to explain to you that right from positioning ourselves with creating a very, very strong workforce, to building capacities to our infrastructure, to looking at adoption of new technologies and linking it holistically from researchers to academicians, to the industry, to the startups, and with international bodies, we would like to see this whole mission moving ahead. And I think all of you would be knowing that for the biotechnology sector, we have put in a very ambitious target of the whole biotech industry sector being 150 billion by 2025. And we see genomics occupying a very, very key position in that. And if you have to look at it from its endpoint, then the whole area of knowledge generation, which is the beginning of it, has to be very strong. And unless that foundation is strong, translation can obviously not be achieved. So our focus on that is huge. We would love to engage with the Human Cell Atlas as we move forward and take this discussion ahead. And the capacities within the country are already geared up to take it. We have a very rich workforce. Our scientists across the country are geared up, and I'm sure they will be able to contribute. Thank you very much, and thank you, Partha, for inviting me here to share my thoughts.